Hi all, it's Emily Rand with ESPN Esports. As it always, almost always is with LPL and China-related things, I'm very sorry for the technical delay. I am happy to be joined by Rob Price, who you also might know as Dagdacasts of the LPL English cast. So first of all, Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, more than happy to be here. Delighted to get the invite, so happy to talk all things LPL.
The first thing I wanted to talk to you about, just in case people don't know who you are, I wanted you to introduce yourself. And I also wanted to ask what it was like to kind of join the LPL cast at the beginning of this year, have to go on hiatus, and then have to come back due to the ongoing pandemic, and what it was like to see the LPL broadcast kind of come back online so quickly.
Yeah, well, to start, I'm Dagda, I'm from Ireland. So I've been casting League of Legends for nearly 4 or 5 years now. Very amateur, obviously, to begin with, and then it kind of started to ramp up from there. And then in January 2019, I left my job in finance to try and do freelancing full-time. So I was casting about 7 or 8 different games. So like between hosting, play-by-play, and color casting, a whole bunch of different stuff. And then after that, I joined. So I got an interview then at the end of 2019 for the LPL, and then came across and joined the LPL as a color caster at the start of 2020. So going back to coming into the LPL was amazing. Like I've kind of been an RNG fan since season 3, and when I was watching Uzi's Vayne at Worlds. So like coming in and casting RNG, I was like, this is amazing. This is so cool. So I really enjoyed that. And then obviously casting like the likes of FPX and the previous world champions IG was amazing. So it's been a lot of fun, and the team here has been super supportive of me coming in. So Hysterics has kind of taken us under his wing a little bit, and so has Clement, and going through just how everything works, getting us all set up and settled. Because obviously moving across the world to China is a bit of an undertaking. But yeah, it's been fantastic. The break for the league was a little bit messy because we all went back home. So I went to Ireland, Munch went to the UK, and Hysterics went back to Australia, with Clement going to Taiwan. So it was all a bit all over the place, but we kind of just kept ourselves sane. So we were doing a lot of work off air. So we had these weekly meetings to try and keep ourselves in check, make sure that we are staying up to date with our stories and just the research that we had to do and everything. So that became a little bit easier because it gave us stuff to do. But the main problem was more the quarantines were the worst, because we did a kind of a week and a half in Shanghai. Then I went back to Ireland and I did 2 weeks in Ireland because I wasn't sure what the story was. And then I had to come back to Shanghai, and then I had to do another 2-week quarantine because we were coming back to Shanghai from a foreign country. So I've been fully quarantined at this stage, and I'm so fed up with it.
Well, this past week we saw a few players who have been quarantined for a while finally return to their teams, more specifically JVG and EDG. But for now, I'm going to talk about these teams later, obviously, but for now, I actually wanted to kick off the LPL discussion around IG, because they're a team that I feel like people look at one game and they're like, how can you be so good? And then they look at the next game and they're like, how can you be so bad? So I'll just start with like my impression of IG and why I think this is. And hopefully that'll lead into kind of a broader discussion that I'd like to have about LPL team identities just generally. So IG, first of all, we saw I feel like we saw the best and the worst of them over the course of the past week. Obviously, I think the thing that everyone's going to point to is the Vayne top. That is the Shy playing Vayne top, I think is the thing that everyone kind of wants to talk about, where IG, for me, historically, since as early as 2015, when you had Mafa coming over with Cacao and Rookie, you saw this team that was really willing to go all in on red side drafts to make the most of what their solo laners could do. And I think that's kind of been an IG constant. I think that's why they were able to win Worlds 2018, was because they were able to, really focus on getting insane picks for their solo laners. That was when I think Ning was at his best as well, which makes a huge difference because, as we all know, Ning is a little bit Coin flippy, I guess. He kind of
That's a
like
nice way to say it. Yeah.
people kind of like want to like open up the dictionary, like the dictionary to coin flip player, and like there's just the picture of Ning and like his sick sneakers. I think we're watching the Shy right now, but I think the thing with IG for me is that heavily reliant on getting some of those red side pick matchups. Sometimes their drafts just look like solo queue. Let's be real, because they're just picking for lane sometimes. And then additionally, the reason why they think they can come back in a lot of these fights, even when they're like, for anywhere from 1K to 5K to 8K down, right? They're still going to be going for these fights. They're still going to be going for stuff where, again, the Shy is TPing in his vein. He doesn't even have his ult, and they win this fight. And they're really heavily relying on their mechanics, which is why they could look so terrible against E-Star, right? A team that we've seen like kind of drop off in recent weeks, and then look so good in some of these games against RNG, and then again look so bad against JDG. So what is your impression of IG's team identity, and why do you think they can look so good one game and so bad the next?
I 100% agree with you with the lane focus. Like, these guys are solo lane kings. Like, that's the way they want to play it. It's Rookie pushing in all the time, Shy pushing in all the time, and then Leanne's going to invade you because he can with all that pressure they've created. And it doesn't really, like, I love talking to Lyric about this because Lyric just loses his mind every time he watches the Shy. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Why is he doing this? And he's winning. So it's like they just consistently keep you under pressure. Even with weird things like the Doran's Blade Horn that we saw coming in as well, and all this kind of stuff. So definitely they are very solo lane focused, which is why I was kind of surprised to see them playing more blue side a lot this season. Like, I expected them to opt towards red so then they can try and get way more when it comes to the counter picks, and we start to see things like the Vayne coming out, or even the Shy getting his Callista banned away a decent amount now too. But the thing is, they don't have a stop button. Like, they're just going to keep going because the best thing that IG can do is try and force stay away from team fights and force more skirmishes is kind of the way to say their team fighting goes, because they just want to try and put you into situations where they can outplay you. They just think they're better than you in a lot of situations, and they're just going to try and outmaneuver, outplay, outperform you in every facet of that team fight. So if you can get, the Shy separated in a 1v2 on opposite sides to Rookie who's in a 1v1, like, that's where IG shine. And that's why even when, in some cases, they end up in these team fights where they're 5-6k down, they do kind of just outplay you, and oftentimes they do end up winning the fight as a result. So I can't really blame them sometimes, but definitely that's why they can look amazing and they can look terrible at other times, because if you end up punishing them because they're constantly overextending a lane, well, now you've gotten yourself a bunch of gold and kills and experience. If you go into team fights and you're able to avoid going into these skirmishes where they get the opportunity to play you, well, then you're in great shape as well. So this is why sometimes they look absolutely godlike. But if those conditions don't fit IG, they really start to struggle.
Yeah, I think we've already seen that. We saw it again in the JDG series most recently. I think the most frustrating thing for me, just as a viewer watching IG, is like, even at Worlds, like this past year, I was just like, you can't keep getting away with this, and then they keep getting away with it until they face FPX. Because I think of all teams, I mean, maybe not of all teams, but IG are one of the most highly visible teams, I think, that get away with just straight up drafting in a really specific style that is, I don't want to say limiting, but it's definitely like, I feel like casters or commentators from other regions, they come into the LPL, they start looking at some of these drafts, and they're like, what is this? Like, why? Like, this is terrible, and this is actively terrible, and this build is terrible. And all of that stuff can be objectively true. However, on the flip side, I think to the point of IG winning Worlds through this strategy of just like, we are going to rely on the raw mechanics of our solo laners in particular, but everyone on this team. And that is how we've won, and that's what we're going to draft to, and this is how we play. I think sticking so stubbornly to that identity is what allowed them to win a world championship. And similarly with FPX, I think FPX were also able to do that with that. Like, we saw them draft against J-Team in their first match and lose. And everyone was like, this is 2015 LGD all over again. They're going to be terrible. This is awful. What is this team doing? And anyone who'd watched the LPL that year had just been like, this is FPX. Like, this is how they draft. These are probably exactly the champions they wanted, despite the fact that you're not really sure where this damage is coming from. You're not really sure what they're doing. Joinb is definitely going to build tank and mid. What do you think of this idea that kind of the LPL success on the international stage? Because this is my hypothesis, and it's something I've been like shouting from the rooftops, I feel, all year when I've been talking about any other region as well, is that the thing that the LPL has more than any other league is that even the quote unquote bad teams have some pretty strong team identities. And that is to their strength and also sometimes to their detriment.
I 100% agree. Almost all of the teams have this really strong identity. And like even
you're cutting out a bit, I think. So I'm gonna have you restart that thought in a minute if we have to adjust VPNs, because sometimes that happens with China. So I guess, I mean, the thing I want to stress while we're hopefully getting Rob back, and he can interrupt me at any time once he comes back, because I know we're waiting on his VPN might be cutting in and out a bit, is that I think in terms of looking at some of these top teams, it can be to their detriment if they're specifically drafting things that are not necessarily what people think would be objectively good. However, when they go to international competition, and this is something that I kind of talk about in terms of talking to even playoff teams going up against each other in the NALCS, for example, I know the biggest piece of advice that when I was talking to Licorice on C9, he was like, stick to what your team will do really well instead of looking at necessarily how to very specifically counter what your opponent does. So looking at yourself first. And I think all of the teams that we've seen that are internationally successful are ones with really strongly formed team identities, despite the fact that, again, I think a lot of people come into LPL and they take a look at drafts and they take a look at how teams play, and they, are very confused by it because objectively it might not be good. I actually think...
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yay, you're back. Okay.
Hey,
cool.
Sorry about that.
I was just ranting about the same topic, but I want your take on LPL team identities. So now we're gonna do take 3 on Rob talking about LPL team identities. So take it away.
Hopefully we get through this one. But yeah, I think we definitely have some strong identities coming into the league. Like even when we looked at Worlds 2019, it was FPX with the 4-man dive bot. That was kind of the way they played. Top Esports now has turned into this really heavy skirmish team. There's a lot of teams that have started to figure out their own identity. Now, as you were saying, it can be good for bad because Top, I think, look a lot weaker than they did last year as a result. There's plenty there to kind of look at and go, okay, well, how does this team actually win right now? Or even my favorite is probably Rogue Warriors, because I feel like they're kind of IG light, where it's like, okay, cool, we're gonna fight no matter what, and it's not really gonna work out for us like 9 times out of 10, but boy, we're gonna go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of love Rogue Warriors for that, despite the fact that you see them kind of into some actual like pretty good early games sometimes. Like they'll have a really strong understanding of like, this is how we want to play the early game, and then they'll get to the mid game and they'll be like, and we're fighting and we don't really know why. So let's talk TES, because I think to start off, this is a team that we've seen them kind of change their identity. We looked at this team, or I looked at this team. I don't know where you put them in your preseason rankings, but I put them incredibly high. I put them like 1 or 2. I was like, this is top esports this year. They're gonna go super far. They're gonna represent China at international events. I'm really excited to see this team. I saw 369 come into this team. last year, and I thought, like, I saw him in Demacia Cup, and I was like, holy crap, this kid's super good. And then he came into the team, and although he did have some like initial struggles and some of his laning matchups, performed super well, especially on his comfort picks. Like the Vladimir, I think, is one that everyone's going to kind of recognize as like a go-to 369 pick. But this team was supposed to be getting an upgrade in Karsa Jungle, was supposed to, still have one of the best mid laners, like not just in China, but in the world, in Knight. They do have a new bot lane. We also have Jackie Love, who has not made an appearance, but as far as I know, has passed quarantine. And you can talk about that more, because as far as I know, when I heard after the news that Jackie Love was announced, he could have played in the FPX game had they held it that weekend. That was my understanding.
Yeah, we thought the same thing, so we're not entirely sure. We got an email chain that comes around to say, hey, look, people are free to play, and we saw that Jackie Love is free to play, and we were actually in a story meeting at the time, and we collectively lost our minds. But yeah, I don't know what happened. Yeah, I don't know where he is.
Yeah, so hopefully, I mean, he might be making an appearance soon, although I don't. The thing with Top now is that I don't think that you can necessarily point to Fodic and say that he's the problem anymore. For me, the big issue has been integrating Karsa onto this team, who, during his Flash Wolves days and also when he was on RNG, was, in my opinion, like one of the best junglers in the world. And now that we're seeing him without, I think, what people would consider a really super definitive shot caller, like Sword Art, like I feel like a ton of people on RNG have really strong voices, but you're obviously going to point to Uzi I. Now we have Karsa looking kind of lost on the map. As Jordan put it when he was on the show, he has anti-synergy with Knight. Which I actually agree with. Don't like you have these two amazing players, and somehow they are just like on completely opposite pages in terms of how they want to play.
We went back and we had a look. This was now a couple of weeks ago. I haven't updated it since, but we went back and like for the first 3.5 weeks, I think it was, I looked at every gank that had happened mid lane, and I think there was 7 ganks that happened, and like 6 of them resulted in kills for the other team. Like they just into every single gank. It was horrific. It was really bad. So yeah, I think look, whatever it is, Carson Knight have not been gelling at all. Even when Carson goes for a gank, they're just doing the complete opposite things, where one person's backing away or they're going in way too aggressive to try and compensate for it. So I don't know how this has come about, because we were always bigging them up as the strongest mid jungle duo coming into LPL 2020, and everyone thought that was going to be the case. But the synergy hasn't been there, so Knight now just gets left on his own, where he's got to make his own advantage in lane. And then, as you were saying, they usually play towards 369 now, because apart from the Shy, 369 has the highest average DPM, highest damage share for top laner on his team. Like, he's just really good. But it is very much Knight finding his own advantages and then trying to help out 369, often with Carson Toe. But it's a very different style of team than when XX was on the roster. So coming back in then to now, how they, instead of being really strong team fighters, which is what we saw in last year, they've gone more towards this weird skirmish scenario where 369 is working in conjunction with Carson Knight to try and pick people off. And Photic is kind of the bringing up the rear, but he's still doing a lot of work now. Like at the beginning, I think he had the lowest gold share for an AD carry. He was lowest damage share for an AD carry. Second lowest damage per minute for an AD carry. Now he's steadily started to go up, so I think he's now averaging in around the same as like Hope and SMLZ and a lot of these guys. So he's definitely had a turnaround performance, but every so often we see the Photic evolve who just runs in and lets it go.
Yeah, I mean, so I always forgive rookies for doing that, because I feel like, and one thing I really honestly love about LPL rookies is that they are like that, right? Like, and I say this all the time for specifically junglers when they come into the scene, but also, I mean, you saw it from 369 last year. I love that they're just overly aggressive. Like, I'd much rather have that than have rookies come in and be super passive. For Top, it still looks like they're going to make playoffs. Like part of this discussion was kind of around playoff bubble teams. I don't think that Top are a bubble team. I think they've done well enough that statistically they're still in a pretty good position to make playoffs, but they're definitely not where we would, or where I had anticipated they would be. What has to, like, is it just we need Carson and Knight to be on the same page? Is it we need Jackie Love to come in? Like, what has to happen for Top to actually make a strong run at the LPL title for spring?
I think definitely Jackie Love coming in will help in twofold, where you've now got this really good AD carry who can come in, but also Jackie Love was a really loud voice on Invictus Gaming. So him coming in and then providing a little bit more shot calling and stability to the team, I think is really needed. Because oftentimes when I look at them, Top are fighting where they really don't need to. They're taking these strange engagements, and you're like, you don't have your team together. You're kind of all over the place here, even if you do have the 5 people here. So I'd rather have them take Jackie Love in to become the shot caller for this team. And again, I think finding some sort of synergy that works between Carson and Knight. It feels like Knight is such a valuable resource that they haven't been able to open up. And yes, Knight is sometimes getting his own lead in games and working with that, but it's not really enough for them to start the snowball or use Knight to his full advantage. So I think it's a twofold: is one, bring in Jackie Love to provide a little bit more of a voice and stability in the bottom lane, but also trying somehow to get Carson Knight to work together. But it hasn't worked out too hot for them so far. So I'm not sure if we're going to see it or when they'll see it, but hopefully with Jackie Love coming in, that might change around.
So I'm going to move to Carson's old team, who has also kind of suffered since Carsa left. So I think part of it is going to be Carsa leaving, but also part of it is obviously RNG's team identity. Speaking of team identities, is so tied to Uzi still, I think, in the minds of everyone. So whenever I get RNG questions on this show, it's always, when is Uzi coming back? And the answer, honestly, guys, is always, I have no idea. As soon as I know, I will let everyone know on Twitter. I promise. But RNG, I think, is another team that I sometimes look at their drafts and I'm like, I know exactly what you want to do. You still want to draft for late game 5v5. I actually think Betty is still a really good player.
I agree.
But I have no idea sometimes what this team is doing. In terms of, I think they themselves, I guess, because Uzi is probably such a strong voice on this team, and also because they have Bao coming in and being a rookie jungler and not necessarily knowing, he just lacks the experience that Karsa had, that MLXG had, because as much as people love to criticize MLXG, myself included, MLXG had a really defined play style, and he also had a ton of experience. So even if you disagreed with what he was doing or his pathing, I don't think he did it needlessly. I think he was doing exactly what he wanted to do. Whether it worked out, that's a different story. But he was a jungler who definitely knew like what he was about, and he knew his team identity, and he knew how that worked, especially with Xiaohu. And Xiaohu has become kind of the scapegoat on this team, despite the fact that I feel like he's had some really, just recently, some really strong performances, even in some of their losses. So where are you at with RNG right now?
I'm kind of up in the air with them still as well. It seems like sometimes they have these insane performances. I'm like, okay, cool. This is a really strong team that I'm looking at for playoffs. But then other times you just see them, and particularly in the last couple of series I've watched them, and they're just like they're taking these weird fights. It's like they don't respect their opponents at all. They're going in, and again, they're behind already in kills. They don't have the items. Their composition wants to scale a little bit later, yet they're just going in and like gun ho for whoever the hell they can find. But it definitely, RNG are a team that I feel like in their successes are a little bit formulaic, where it's okay, cool. For the first 5 minutes, we're going to play towards the top side. Xiaolong Bao to play towards the top side of the map. We get Longshin set up. Dragon Spawn, cool. We're going to rotate down to the bottom side of the map. And I think some teams have started to look at how can they disrupt that pattern of play, because RNG are definitely a team that love to play down around that dragon. If they can start to get that snowball going, that's fantastic for them. and they're also very decisive in their engagements when they're ahead. Like it's a thing of beauty because an awful lot of times when I watch teams and how they'll turn for an engage, it's kind of one person will go and then everyone else will trundle along a little bit later. But definitely when it's RNG, they all turn on a dime. It's in perfect synchronization, and you'll get this like Jarvan flag and drag into a cataclysm. Everyone's ready, and that's where they can shine in these team fights. But sometimes the coordination isn't quite there. The gold lead or the anything else isn't quite there for them. So I think there's times where I look at them and like they just haven't thought about, oh, okay, we're behind. We should probably hang on for a second. But then entering into the mid game, they definitely slow it down a lot, which I think gives teams like Invictus Gaming a chance to try and punish them first.
So, do you think RNG are going to be in playoffs? Because I still think RNG are definitely going to be in playoffs.
I think they will. Like they've had two strange losses now that you wouldn't really expect it of them, but they still, when they have the opportunity, they look like a really good team. And as Chad is asking, we're still looking at where Uzi is. I think he'll be back relatively soon. I think they're going to bring him in, especially as we start to approach, like we're a week and a half out from the end of the split. So this is where you bring in Uzi now for towards the end, get a game or two underneath him, and then I think he should be good for playoffs as well. But every story meeting we have, there's like the note of, is Uzi back now? Is he here now? No, he's over here, right? So yeah, we don't really know.
So I want to talk about three teams that are really interesting to me, and I think have very separate ways of playing the game: EDG, WE, and OMG. So when we're looking at the playoff picture, I'm looking at where these three teams are going to fall. EDG, again, I touched on this with Jordan. I think EDG has this weird thing where they tend to over prepare for opponents that are considered above them, I guess, and then under prepare for opponents that are that they consider beneath them, and that has bit them in the butt several times, in my opinion. Where do you think they're at?
I agree with you 100%, and I don't know if it's a symptom of the team itself or just how intense the schedule is. Because it feels like, hey, look, they've fully prepped for some of these top teams, but I think when you've got like how quickly the whole split has come through, I don't know if it's a case of they just haven't had as much time to put into the other teams. But I look at some of their performances, like against Orangey, they looked really good. And I was like, okay, cool, this is a team that can do really well. And then I'm looking at some of the other series, I'm like, lads, come on now, like what he's asking. But yeah, I still think EDG are looking really strong. Their fundamentals are really, really good. And how they play the map, how they team fight, they just their basics are really, really on point. And I want to see if they can continue that forward coming into the split. But there's still sometimes there's just like I look at how jungle plays around mid lane. I'm like, this isn't quite where I'd like it to be. So there's still moments where I'm like, okay, cool, EDG, you look like you'll just maybe about pip into to playoffs, but I don't know how you're going to beat the big boys.
So let's move on to Vici, OMG, WE. Who do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I don't. Well, we'll start with Vici because they were the first ones there. But I've been really impressed with Vici's turnaround. Definitely the when we look back at week one where they're Chieftain and Forge are going in, I think it was against BLG, and they're giving over 2 kills to Meteor. I was like, okay, cool, this team needs some work. But definitely as the split has gone on, Forge has really found his own identity. These assassins have been looking fantastic. Ikes, I think, has found a much better role in the team than Chieftain did, and they're starting to look great. They found a home for Forge and these kind of tank engage top laners. So definitely, they as a whole seem to be coming together a lot more. So I've been really impressed with Vici. This guy looks amazing. I'm super hyped for him. And then I watched him come into the league. I was like, oh no, this is not what I expected at all. So definitely, and then as he starts to rise up, like his Wukong the other day was so good. So this is where I'm like, I don't know. Yeah, that's where I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to love Cube again. I've been hurt before, and I don't know how to feel about him. So I was hypercritical of him at the beginning of this bit with his Ornn. I thought his Ornn was actually pretty atrocious, where the ultimates were missed. They weren't really even the right targets that he was going for in a lot of situations, and are missing the combo altogether when it came to the ultimate. So I was pretty against Cube to begin with, but definitely he's come in on his own now. Where like as I said, the Wukong looked absolutely amazing, and he's had some really strong performances for them over the last few days. So I'm starting to get back on the Cube hype train, thinking, okay, maybe he can do it, but I'm a little bit hesitant this time.
I do think I think the Wukong has been so important for them, and how he uses it is just really great. I remember it was banned against Flandra on the same day, and then
Yeah.
Cube got to have the debut, and I felt like Flandra was like sitting back at his place, being
Fuming.
like, they banned it against me. I wanted to be the one. So I'm going to move on to OMG, a team that I think is, I guess, less straightforward than I expected them to be. I still think they are really heavily reliant on SMLZ performing really well, which is what I expected. Uh, but again, I think some of the more like pleasant surprises on this team, Hacker has been, you know, a jungler who I think he replaced Tian when they were on Suning. Okay. He replaced Tian when they were on Suning. He, I guess, didn't perform as well after that initial bump where they were like, okay, Hacker is the answer. And then now on OMG, I feel like he has been kind of the driving force behind the fact that not only have OMG have some like really good series where they haven't had to rely on SMLZ, but they've also been able to just, I guess, diversify their play style a bit. Unfortunately, I think Rob cut out, so he'll be back in a few seconds and I'll get his opinion on OMG. I am really sorry that we're having so many technical issues, guys, but I have to say that of all esports shows, I definitely have the best chat. LPL chat is the best, and you guys are the most understanding. But yeah, I mean, for me, for OMG, for if people are wondering like why I am looking at OMG so much more closely, and I didn't have as many expectations for them, is because historically, I think SMLZ has been the type of player on his teams where you have to really, really play around him, and to I guess a strength, and then also to a detriment. But this OMG team, I mean, Icon is still sometimes inconsistent. However, I think Hacker has really leveled up his play, and that's kind of why I've been looking at them. It's true. LPL chat was molded in tech issues. I feel like anyone who's watched any Chinese League of Legends probably over the past few years has been used to any sort of internet issues. I know LPL pauses and LPL talk shows. It's very true. My favorite internet China issue, for anyone who's wondering, I guess I'll go a little off topic while we're waiting for Rob, presumably his VPN to get back, is there was a Demacia Cup that no one could like log into the game. People kept getting booted, and it was Masters 3 versus EDG. And finally, Dade, who was on Masters 3 at the time, was able to get back into the thing. And so they were like, okay, well, Dade, just like push the minions so we can restart the game. And he did, and that actually turned out to cost Masters 3 the game. And the game was awarded to EDG, and EDG went on to win. So it was very unlucky, but that's kind of my favorite China internet story, outside of the fact that there was the one other NEST tournament where a different company bought the streaming rights mid tournament, and then the stream got cut, and then you had to swap to the other stream and find it.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Rob.
Amazing. Sorry
Hopefully
about this.
chat can. Yeah. No, I mean, they're, like I said, we have the most understanding chat because they are really used to LPL issues. I just shared my favorite LPL technical issue, but now we're going to go back on topic, and I'm going to ask you about OMG. I just waxed poetic about Hacker and how well he's been performing, so that was kind of my take on OMG, but I want yours.
Yeah, I agree. I think OMG when we were coming into the split, we're kind of like, okay, they've got Hacker, SMLZ is coming back onto the team. It was, and because this team has been solely focused on Icon, it was kind of like Icon and his backup dancers, but it's definitely come into much more being a bit of a boy band now, where the three of them look like they're really working together. So I think definitely this team is it has been gelling super well. I think Hackers looked he still has his issues, but definitely looks stronger. And for OMG, SMLZ, as you said, is definitely the main proponent for this team when we look at them, though. Super consistent. His damage has been crazy high. And in team fights, it's usually him that I'm looking at to see how he's going to get on.
And then finally on our last team that I want to touch on, WE. What are your thoughts on them? Because again, I talked to Jordan about this. I expected nothing, and I got a lot more than I expected.
Yeah, they're like WE are doing pretty well, but it's kind of the system that they have that seems to be working super well. Because when I look at Jomung, he's gonna go in aggressive regardless of whether you want him to or not. So it seems like WE have kind of set up this system of like saving Private Jomung, where it's like, okay, as long as we can get down to the bottom lane and keep this guy safe and get him a few kills, so when he does go in hyper aggressive, he's got the backup of items to actually do something. So it's been very much like, okay, Morgan, you've got TP, right? That's coming down to the bottom lane. We're going to have Teacher Man now, on which the Aurelian Sol looks really good the other day. But on like Pantheon, these kind of picks, or even the Diana, where he can roam down to the bottom lane and actually make these plays in conjunction with the bottom side of the map. But they're pretty entertaining to watch now. Like we've seen Jomon getting a few, getting a few duo kills in the bottom lane, which is always exciting to see. So I'm looking forward to seeing what WE can do. But the problem is that inconsistency with Jomon, where if you can get him a couple of kills and he doesn't in too heavily, fantastic. WE look great. But if he's just left to his own devices, yeah, WE are going to struggle.
So in that cluster, we've got like I think JDG right now is definitely better than their 9-4 record since Zoom returned. I think they're looking like phenomenal. So between eStar, EDG, TES, RNG, OMG, WE, and VG, this is like incredible parity right now in the LPL, by the way, guys. Who do you think of this kind of like weird middle of the pack, may make playoffs, may drop out? Who do you think could make a weird run for the LPL title?
So it's super hard to call. I think for Vici, just looking at their schedule, like they've only got the 2 games left, whereas everyone else seems to kind of have a game in hand. So it's hard to call Vici right now. But then, like this is what I love is that like our last few games for the likes of OMG, EDG, and WE are all against each other. So it's really hard to call and just say, yeah, look, I think it's going to be EDG or whatever who's going to make it, because it really does rely on those last few games. I think when I look at it though, I think EDG have definitely been EDG have been very consistent, so I think they're going to pip it out, and I think Top and RNG will end up in there as well. eStar, I'm not sure. Look, I've loved eStar since they came in. Like, I love a good underdog story. And they came in, I was like, Way is a monster. His Jarvan looks insane. They're playing around bot lane. They look great. This snowball starts to come through, but the problem is it looks like eStar started to get figured out in the early game. And now the inexperience is showing with their shot calling when they're behind or even. So it's really hard because I don't know. I think if eStar end up in these games where people are consistently going, okay, cool, we control this early game, we ban it away from some of these main picks, but then we can have this strong early game. Like JDG plowed through them, like it wasn't even close. So I think eStar, I think will still make playoffs, but I don't think they're going to go as far as everyone was kind of hoping for this rookie squad. So I think it really comes down to OMG, WE, and Vici. And I think OMG would just about pit people. I think they've been more consistent. And even for myself, I'd love to see OMG make it. Like I remember watching 2014 Worlds where it was like going and Cool and all these guys watching OMG wreck face at that. But and now we've started to see them have a little bit of success. So I'd love to see them continue that forward into playoffs and hopefully make it a little bit further, just for the organization as a whole. But it is incredibly close, and I can't wait to see those 3 EDG, OMG, and WE all face off against each other.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad at the demise of E-Star, but you could kind of see it coming. I actually thought that the initial loss to EDG, like all the way back when we returned, was kind of a signal that they were going to adjust then. And they didn't. They just kept. I mean, this is a group of incredibly mechanically skilled players.
Oh yeah.
So if they can figure out how to play a mid game, I think it will be, because like, think about the games we've seen them come back in, right? Like against LGD, that was pretty much LGD face planting. It wasn't E-Star like sure they were outperforming LGD in team fights, but LGD had to pick some pretty terrible team fights around objectives to get to that point, and then E-Star surprisingly won that series. I think E-Star they have a lot of typical tells for a really young team, but I also think that the cool thing about them is that we still don't know where their ceiling is, right? Because they're only going to keep learning more about the game and improving. So
it feels like they're kind of stuck. Like I'm hoping, because I want to look at E-Star and be like, yeah, this is going to be the successful team. I'm really hoping they don't do the Sino Dragons where they come in, everyone's talking about them, and then they just drop off and become dominant. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what E-Star can do, but I'm hoping this isn't them just being found out and then no other stock.
So we have some comments and questions in chat. We have E-Star's biggest problem is their champion pool, and it's a big issue for basically every one of their players. I'd actually somewhat agree with that. I was kind of surprised that people weren't banning out Xiaoxi. I thought one of the biggest tells that people didn't study E-Star was not getting in that thrush ban.
Yeah.
And also just not paying attention to what they like to do bot lane early.
Yeah.
If LPL played one for all, how many teams would play Pantheon?
I actually don't know. Yeah.
I feel like I'm trying to think of what the most LPL champ would be for LPL teams to play one for all.
I feel like the Olaf. I feel like we're the only region that plays like as consistently plays Olaf.
So we've got we were talking about this. We have BLG, LGD, DMO, LNG, and Victory 5 to plop into LCS, LEC, or
yeah.
LCK.
I think if you took BLG and LGD, I think they could do reasonably okay. It depends kind of which BLG you guess, because they can look super hit or miss. Sometimes they look like we saw in that week one of the split, absolutely amazing, really strong macro. They look fantastic. Other times they just look like they fall apart. And LGD again can look great on their days, like yesterday against RNG. But then you start to get into the I'm not so certain areas. Dominus, I don't know.
Chol is back. Chol is back.
True, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so when he came over, or when Twilight came on, Xiao Wei came on, I was like, okay, this dude looks pretty okay. And then I think he kind of hinted with his Cassiopeia build, but other than that, I think it was all good. Yeah, but I mean, Dominus can still be an okay team. I don't think they'd be a top team, but I think they'd still be able to fight with a lot of the teams anyway. I think they'd still be middle of the pack, if not kind of in the same position that they're in. But LNG and V5, I wouldn't imagine do particularly well. LNG, yeah, V5
are just like stick. Like first it was stick Mole in every position because he's obviously like our most skilled player, and then it was maybe Mole was the problem, and then last night it was very obvious that Mole is not the problem.
I just don't understand this team. Like we had last year, right? We got us. You know, it was nice. It was a cool gimmick that you swap Windy and Bowl. It's like good for you. And then they just were like, wait, what if we did that everywhere? And like, no, this is what every other team has got to find roles. Why not stick to them? But to be fair to them, though, like CLX has been doing pretty good on that team. I was surprised to see him have relative success, but yeah, V5, I can't imagine doing so hot. They've got a lot of issues, and I swear to God, if they do another level 2 tower dive, I'm gonna lose my mind. But but LNG,
if it didn't work the first 12 times, maybe they'll work the 13th.
15th time's the charm. Everyone knows that. But yeah, LNG, I just feel like they don't do anything. Is my biggest issue with them. Like they just sit there, they'll farm, and we're kind of coining them as the opportunists. Or Munch yesterday was kind of came up with the scavengers, because it does feel like they they'll come across someone who's like in river and like, okay, cool, we'll kill them, or okay, well, there was a play that made bot side that didn't work out, so I suppose I'll take rift tower top side, or vice versa. But it doesn't really feel like they've set up a play or there's any
No.
kind of game plan going in. It's just like pottering along and hoping for the best. And sometimes it works out, but it doesn't strike me as convincing that if we put them into any other region that they'd be able to do anything any better.
So final thoughts, since, again, I'm going to have to, I know chat asked when I can have you back, probably as soon as possible, so we can hopefully have a clean show without any technical issues. If you had to give people one reason to watch the LPL this upcoming week, what would it be?
God, there's so many. Well, like, yeah, I mean, look, it's the most entertaining league in my opinion. There's blood. There's actually pretty good macro. There's some of the highest mechanical play around. Like, it is the most entertaining league to watch in my opinion, hands down.
And it's our playoff race, and all of
the
bubble teams are facing each other, so it's gonna be, it's gonna be an entertaining time. Even if you're pulling your hair out at the drafts, even if you don't understand why people are building what they are, which happens, believe it or not, even more frequently in the LPL. But like Munchables actually DM me. He's like, "Do you have any suggestions about our cast?" And I was like, "No, you guys are doing great. Like, you're not like critiquing everyone's like draft and build like super super hard, because honestly, like every team ints builds and drafts in LPL pretty consistently from like an objective standpoint." So I think you guys like pointed out when it's like really egregious, but other than that, you kind of have to learn to go with the flow, because that's just LPL. It's just the way we are. Thank you so much for joining me and for putting up with all of our technical issues. Also,
and my ones.
Shout out to chat. I definitely have the best chat of any ESPN esports show, mainly because most of you are used to having internet issues because you watch League of Legends in China. Thank you so much, guys. The LPL show airs every week at 8 p.m. Eastern, hopefully without any technical delays, which is 8 a.m. China time. And then also the LCS will now be available on ESPN2 this weekend. So if you ever wanted to show your parents what League of Legends is all about, you can actually show them on live television. Again, thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will see you next week for the LPL show.